coming to you live from the Tino Studios in Minooka, Illinois. I'm your host, Bucky Shanks, and this is Tino Tonight. Welcome everybody to the Week 3 edition of Tino Tonight. A wild Week 2 is in the books that saw 6 of the top 10 all suffer defeat. The rankings are sure to cause some conversation as the new top 25 will be revealed later tonight. And we start this week's show with the squeak of the week. One hell of a matchup as Colorado came into this one fresh off a stat correction that turned a Week 1 win versus number 4 Arkansas into a loss. I feel your pain on that one, damn Badgers. Oklahoma came into this one continuing right where they left off from a dominant 2019 season, and that's continuing to hand out losses to anyone that crosses their path. Fast forward to Week 2, and a pissed-off Colorado team was more than up for the challenge and defended the home turf as 64,000 packed Folsom Field and watched their Buffaloes pull off the biggest upset and win in school history. They would win a nail-biter over the Sooners 1,018.80 to 1,006.05. The 12.75-point win is the 17th closest game in Tino NCAA history. It's still a short history, but history nonetheless. Next up, we got movers and shakers. To be featured on this segment, all you have to do is defeat back-to-back ranked teams. First one to accomplish this feat in 2020 is Notre Dame. Colorado and Florida should be featured here as well, but stat corrections would not have any part of it. Whatever, man. But back to the Fighting Irish. They were able to take down Vanderbilt in Week 1, and they went duck hunting in Week 2. As they beat Oregon in Week 2, they get a chance to sit here in this segment next week as they take on number 22 Georgia Tech up next. And that'll bring us to the unveiling of the new rankings after 2 weeks completed, the brand new top 25. Coming in at number 25, the Florida Gators at 1-1. After the stat correction loss to then number 3 Wisconsin, nope, I'm not bitter, just reporting the news. They rebounded in Week 2 and avenged a loss from last season as they took down the number 18 NC State Wolfpack. They get Georgia in Week 3. Number 24 West Virginia 2-0. The Mountaineers remain undefeated as they took down Arizona Week 1 and number 16 Oregon State in Week 2. They look to make it 3 straight as they face Oklahoma State in the conference opener. Number 23 Florida State 1-1. The Seminoles slide from 6 down to 23 as they have simply been underwhelming to start the 2020 season. They were fortunate they opened with Cal Week 1 or this team would be sitting 0-2. They got pounded by just under 200 points last week to Texas. It's very early, but back-to-back low point totals have fans in Tallahassee concerned. North Carolina is up next. Number 22 Georgia Tech 1-1. After beating number 10 Washington in Week 1, the Yellow Jackets suffered a crushing loss to hated in-state rival Georgia in Week 2. It will not get any easier in Week 3 as they face arguably the hottest team in the country in Notre Dame. Number 21 Colorado 1-1. The Buffaloes enter the top 25 after the biggest win in school and Tino history after they defeated number 1 Oklahoma last week. That's definitely one way to overcome a stat correction loss in Week 1. Up next for Colorado, an 0-2 Arizona team. Number 20 Michigan State 1-1. The Spartans rebounded from the beating they took Week 1 at the hands of Washington State. They beat Mississippi State in a close one Week 2. Purdue is up next in the conference opener. Number 19 Washington State 1-1. The Cougars lost to Penn State last week after beating Michigan State Week 1. They slide from 10-19 after the loss. Week 3 will not be easy as they face Oregon. Number 18 Auburn 1-1. The Tigers exploded on the scene Week 1, scoring 1,256 points in a win over Penn State. Week 2 would be a lot different story as they only put up 853 points and lost to Michigan. Good job, Bucky. They dropped 6 spots as a result. Mississippi State is up next. Number 17 Michigan 1-1. The Wolverines jumped 8 spots after beating Auburn last week. Nebraska is up next in Week 3. Number 16 Iowa State 2-0. The Cyclones knocked off LSU and Iowa so far. Strength of schedule has left a lot of questions unanswered surrounding this team, but the Big 12 is looking a lot tougher than last season, so we will get answers soon enough. Texas Tech is up next. Number 15, Arizona State 2-0. The Sun Devils, similar to Iowa State, leave a lot of unanswered questions. The Pac-12 is going to be a gauntlet, so we will find out if this team is for real soon enough. Oregon State is up next. Number 14, Arkansas 1-1. The Razorbacks escaped Week 1 beating Colorado. Week 2 not as fortunate as Kansas put it on them. The Razorbacks will need a big win in Week 3 over Alabama to get this train back on the tracks. Number 13, Wisconsin 1-1. Taking the same path as Arkansas, the Badgers were a Thursday morning away from being 0-2 right now. They beat Florida by 4 Week 1, lost by 26 in Week 2 to Washington. They opened the Big Ten slate with Ohio State. Number 12, Washington 1-1. After laying an absolute egg Week 1 versus Georgia Tech, the Huskies rebounded Week 2, taking down number 3, Wisconsin. The Huskies will get UCLA in Week 3. Number 11, Virginia Tech 1-1. Possibly one of the most underrated teams in the country, the Hokies lost to UCLA Week 1 and rebounded with a high-scoring win over Maryland Week 2. NC State is next in Week 3. Number 10, Alabama 1-1. The Tide rebounded from a loss Week 1 to Baylor with a win over Nebraska Week 2. The Tide will look to make it 2 straight if they can beat Arkansas in Week 3. Number 9, Ohio State 1-1. The Buckeyes offense hasn't missed a beat, scored 1,039 in a Week 1 loss to Oregon. They bounced back in Week 2, scoring 1,131 in a win over Miami. They face Wisconsin in Week 3. Number 8, Oklahoma 1-1. The Sooners beat NC State in Week 1 and lost a close game to Colorado in Week 2. If this is history repeating itself, the rest of the country has just been put on notice. The Sooners' last loss came last year in Week 2, and we all know how the season finished up. Kansas is up next for an angry Sooners team. Number 7, Oregon 1-1. The Ducks beat Ohio State in the season opener before losing Week 2 to a red-hot Notre Dame team. Oregon faces Washington State up next. Number 6, Notre Dame 2-0. After beating Vanderbilt in Week 1, they quickly proved it was no fluke as they dropped number 2 Oregon in Week 2. They got the respect of the voters as they jumped from 20 up to 6. They get Georgia Tech next. Number 5, Clemson 2-0. The Tigers beat South Carolina Week 1 and USC in Week 2. They get a Syracuse team in Week 3 that has put up over 1,100 points in both their games this year. Number 4, Baylor 2-0. The Bears beat number 5 Alabama in Week 1 and LSU in Week 2. The SEC Killers will now turn their attention to their own conference as they open conference play with Texas in Week 3. Number 3, Tennessee 2-0. After beating Kansas State and Wake Forest, the Volunteers will open conference play with Vanderbilt in Week 3. Number 2, Kansas 2-0. After beating Iowa Week 1, they took down number 4 Arkansas in Week 2. It doesn't get any tougher in Week 3. They get Oklahoma next, who they lost to twice last season, including the Big 12 title game. And the number 1 team in the country, the UCLA Bruins 2-0. Mr. IPA himself took down number 15 Virginia Tech Week 1 and followed that up, putting up 1266 last week versus Texas Tech, which was the 6th highest point total in Tino history. The Bruins will look to make it 3 straight as they take on Washington in Week 3. And that brings us to the games of the week coming up in Week 3. We've got number 1 UCLA taking on number 12 Washington. Number 9 Ohio State taking on number 13 Wisconsin. Number 2 Kansas taking on number 8 Oklahoma. Number 19 Washington State takes on number 7 Oregon. Number 14 Arkansas takes on number 10 Alabama. And number 6 Notre Dame will be taking on number 22 Georgia Tech. And that'll do it for the Week 3 edition of Tino tonight. For everybody here at Tino Studios in Buckingham Palace, I am your host, Bucky Shanks. Good night, everybody.